I've got part 4 of Greg Hallett on tonight. I was able to share for literally 2 minutes this afternoon before I was closed down again. So I think I can read the writing on the wall, and Facebook do not want me sharing into groups or anywhere else for that matter. So good evening, everybody. It's been a glorious day yet again. Greg, welcome. Quite popular, I have to say. You have just given me and the audience so much information. So we've got maybe an hour to go again. We've been talking about the Queen. I've been talking to a constitutional expert. Well, that's what he calls himself. And he suggested that because we believe that the Queen is fake, that we need psychiatric help. What do you make of that, Greg?
We did cartoons of him 6 months ago, and we basically laughed him off the page. He's very backward. He's got about 400 books on royalty going back to 1400s, but he just doesn't get it.
He doesn't get it. He doesn't.
He doesn't get any of the information he says and that he's learned. He doesn't understand trickery. He was a policeman. He may have been a detective. He did ping a couple of pedophiles, though, so that's to his credit. So he says. But he just doesn't have the nous. And I think he's the sort of copper that people would soft touch him and walk around him. They'd say one thing and do another, and he'd go, it just stuff is reality.
I confronted him for days now and said, look, I told you ages ago, why aren't you confronting the fact that we've got a fake Queen? He won't touch that subject. He loves the Queen. So what does that say about him? Are we talking about cognitive dissonance?
Well, we're also talking about dinner plates. He loves the dinner plate with the image of the Queen on it. He loves the biscuit tin with the image of the Queen on it. But he's never met her. He's never sat down and had a cup of tea with her. He's never cooked a meal with her. He's never just hung out with her. He actually doesn't know her. He's just swallowed all the PR imagery. And the other thing is he does not deal in the definitions of words, and everything comes down to the definitions of words. So what I thought we'd do today is look at the Privy Counsellor oath and look at the definitions of words and what it actually means. And the Privy Counsellor oath says, we're taking everything off the Queen and giving it to Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, and you're going to call that patriotism.
Right, that's patriotism, is it?
Yeah. Patriotism where everything is stripped off the Queen. She wears a crown, waves, gets her image on a biscuit tin, and we wave back, and we think she's the crown. And most of the time she either doesn't wear the crown or wears the wrong crown or wears Granny's tiara.
Is our life seen through a biscuit tin and a gunner plate and a glass? Are we just attaching ourselves to some sort of false, fake logo?
Yeah, it's the same with, let's say, teenage bands. We'll look at the teenage band and it's got a drummer and a guitarist and a singer and a dancer. And we will predominantly identify with one of them and dress like them and take on their identity, and then that identity becomes our own. And we've never met the band, and yet they are the favourite thing in our lives, and we imitate them and read everything about them and absorb it, and that becomes our culture. So what we've got with the Queen, who's absolutely fake, she's never been a queen, for so many people, she is culture. And without the Queen, they lose their culture. But she's really just a culture vulture. And it's not real. Like all the grannies who buy the royal biscuits and chat together and have all the books about the royal family. And
talk about Marks and Spencers and all those sort of cultural...
They don't have their own life, so they get it off royalty. Most people actually live in a non-reality. There's very few people who live in a reality. Very, very few. And if you meet them, it's really refreshing. Most people are visibly way off in their heads, but most people live vicariously through others and other cultures like bands or royals. So the royals actually attach themselves to bands and actors. So it's all a giant fantasy. And what's happening is we're waking up and realising that we live in a non-reality and the reality we have is quite hard. and the non-reality that's projected upon us is an unreal escapism that has no real advantage to us. It doesn't advance us in any way.
So other people really, if you think about it, life can be mundane, can't it? You go Monday to Friday doing the same job. I think it's a given now. The majority of people don't really like their job anymore. And so they like the fiction. They want to read Hello magazine and want to see what they perceive the other half lives like. Seems very glamorous, doesn't it?
It's how the other 0.1% lives. It's not how the other half lives. Like, the British people occupy 4% of England, and the other 94% is owned by the aristocracy. And then there's 2% for services, like motorways, etc.
I was talking to somebody today, and they were saying how EU and agriculture hasn't been discussed that much with regards to leaving the European Union. And whether it features in the withdrawal deal, I don't know. But these farmers get paid huge subsidies to not farm their land. Now, how bonkers is that?
Yeah.
They can take your land off you after 5 years of not working the land.
It is all about a land grab and a sovereignty grab. And the EU was formed because they knew that Elizabeth was illegitimate. And through the illegitimate Elizabeth, they had a chance of stealing the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And because Southern Ireland joined the EU, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and all Ireland, stealing it because Elizabeth is fake. So people need to wake up from the royal biscuit tins and royal plates and the fake reality and the non-reality projected on them and realise that the Queen's are fake. And that is the core issue of why their lives are an utter and total misery. And if people actually looked at their lives, they would go, this life is an utter and total misery except for the paint on the walls and the occasional rose, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The rest is debt and chores and then tax. And taxes are illegal, taxes are fraud. We discussed that yesterday. Taxes.
Well, yeah, I mean, taxes were brought about because of wars. Well, the wars they're done and dusted.
No, they're not. They never declared the end of World War I so they could keep taxing people.
Yeah.
And the people that they declare who won the war, it's usually the opposite.
Right. A lot of things happened between World War I and World War II, didn't they?
Yeah. So I want to talk about the Privy Council. The Privy Council formed in 1708, but really the Privy Council of England was starting around Henry VIII and really bolstered up by Elizabeth I. So last night when we had the interview, and I took a grab at that date, and that's pretty accurate. So what I'll do is I'll read out the Privy Councillor oath and then analyse it. So, quote, "You do swear by Almighty God to be a true and faithful servant unto the Queen's Majesty as one of Her Majesty's Privy Council. You will not know or understand of any manner of thing to be attempted, done or spoken against Her Majesty's person, honour, crown or dignity royal, but you will let, L-E-T-T, which means condemn, but you will let and withstand the same to the uttermost of your power and either cause it to be revealed to Her Majesty herself or to such of her Privy Council as shall advertise Her Majesty of the same. You will in all things to be moved, treated and debated in conscience, and will keep secret all matters committed and revealed unto you, or that shall be treated of secretly in council. And if any of the said treaties or councils shall touch any of the councillors, you will not reveal it unto him, but will keep the same until such time as, by the consent of Her Majesty or of the council, publication shall be made thereof."
Like Chatham House rules, then?
It's Mafia House rules, Mafia Chatham House rules. "You will to your uttermost bear faith and allegiance to the Queen's Majesty, and will assist and defend all civil and temporal jurisdictions, preeminences and authorities granted to Her Majesty and annexed to the Crown by acts of Parliament or otherwise, against all foreign princes, persons, prelates, states, or potentates, and generally in all things you will do as a faithful and true servant ought to do to Her Majesty. So help you God." End quote. Now, if you took a Mafia Omerta quote, pretty similar.
Do they do a blood oath as well?
What it's saying is that we are going to cover up for each other, and if we find one Privy Counsellor having sex with a busload of Catholic school children in Ireland, we won't tell them that we've seen it, and we will mention it to another Privy Counsellor who we think might talk to the Queen. If he doesn't, it's not our business. And then if the Queen finds out, she can deal with it after that person's dead or not at all. And in the meantime, all power goes to Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which is the Crown. That's actually what it's saying.
Can I just say, have you got a list of those Privy Counsellors in front of you? Because I believe that people like Andrea Leadsom, who I truly believed was going to take over the Tory party, but of course the establishment didn't want her to do that. But she's a Privy Counsellor, along with people like Theresa Villiers from Northern Ireland, that was.
Trying to keep out of the personification so you can just see how it is designed to perpetually not work. Basically, everyone in positions of authority, the honourable, like MPs and Privy Counsellors, they are actually in that position to make sure no one is in that position to actually do that job, because we're living in a non-reality. So people have government and judicial jobs in order to ensure that nothing of any value actually happens.
So this is actually the real government.
Yeah, they're making a lot of decisions behind the scenes, and they are sabotaging, and they're working for the Crown, but we don't know what the Crown is. And the Crown turns out to be the deep state of the United Kingdom, and the deep state of the United Kingdom is Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, and they declared in 1953 on Coronation Day to destroy the lives of everyone in Britain and the world. And they're occupying the Crown doing that, and Elizabeth is going, I can't do anything about it because I'm doubly illegitimate and I live in a nice palace and that's all right by me.
Did she have any personal attributes that meant she could have got a job in any shape or form?
She was educated for 7.5 hours a week from the age of 6 to 10. And then from the age of 10 to 17, she was educated for 10.5 hours a week. And most of that was in socialist Marxism.
The people who educated her were from the Tavistock Institute?
More or less, yes. When she signed the Lisbon Treaty and the Maastricht Treaty, that was absolutely written according to her childhood education.
It's interesting, actually, because this particular constitutional expert, inverted commas, who we've been talking about at the beginning of the show, he reckoned that the Queen actually hadn't given her royal assent to anything since about 1854. No monarch had actually given a royal assent since 1854. So how does it work? Because that's our understanding. The monarch gives the royal assent to, as you mentioned, the Lisbon Treaty, joining the European Community on the 1st of January 73. Who is actually signing the documents off? So many different stories.
Exactly. And sometimes Elizabeth signs in the top right-hand corner and underlines her signature. And anything that's underlined, anything below it and to the left of it is to be ignored. So when Elizabeth signs and underlines her signature in the top right-hand corner of the document, like with the Australian Royal Styles and Titles of 1973, that means that everything in the Australian Royal Styles and Titles of 1973 is to be ignored.
Wow. Okay.
Now, Elizabeth also signs the Z in Elizabeth as an S and as a J and as a G to say Sovereign Joseph Gregory.
How do we know G means you?
Because she's just been abdicating to me all over the place. That is actually her role, is to abdicate to me. That's her entire role. Like every monarch has a role. And most people never, ever find out what that role is. I used to hang out with the Queen Mother's bodyguard. He was a great friend of mine. And we used to sit in cafes 4 times a week for about an hour and a half and just chew the fat on everything. So I just got all the secrets. And when the Prime Minister was trying to assassinate me, it was the Black Rod that told the Queen Mother's bodyguard, who told me, so I get pre-warnings of my own assassination attempts. So, so when I can do many episodes on how and why Elizabeth keeps abdicating to me, and how I know that the J stands for Joseph and the G stands for Gregory. But the fact is that she writes Elizabeth with a Z, with an S, with a J, and with a G, and underlined and not underlined. So her signature varies, and the position that she places her signature on the documents also varies. There's a saying in the Bible, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's.
Yes.
Which means the name on the coin is the person you pay the tax to, or the name on the coin is the person who is the monarch, the sovereign, the Caesar, the emperor, right?
Yeah.
So it's Caesar's coin. So most of the British coins read Elizabeth to Greg.
Right.
That's one of the ways I know she's abdicated to me, but also the royal styles and titles. But also she came to New Zealand to abdicate to me and was backing out. So they shot at her on the 14th of October, 1981. And then she saw me 2 days later on the 16th of October, 1981, with the worst case of diarrhea ever.
You mean verbal diarrhea?
No, physical diarrhea. She was given a really bad case of diarrhea, and then that was put under a 25-year D notice. And the day that was up, the Queen Mother's bodyguard came and saw me and told me the story, and I told him my version, and then he filled in all the gaps. So I can talk about that stuff for ages and ages and ages. In some ways it's distraction stuff, but in some ways it's just supportive stuff. But any wild thing I say, I can actually spend half an hour explaining and give visuals, etc.
Okay, so the Privy Council, the Queen heads the Privy Council. Is the Queen a Knight of Malta?
Been told that the Knights of Malta are in charge of the world's money. The tradition received is once the story of Prince Marcos Manuel is revealed, the Knights of Malta are no longer confined to the Vatican. The Knights of Malta were imprisoned in the Vatican in 1834 when Prince Marcos Manuel was born. And when his story was told, which was by me in 2014, the Knights of Malta were released, and they were released at the inauguration of President Trump. And it was all through the papers, and the Pope was going, I am executing the Knights of Malta out of the Vatican. And most people didn't even know the Knights of Malta were locked
in the Vatican.
And he fires the first in charge of the Knights of Malta, then he fires the second in charge of the Knights of Malta. And it's all over the paper, all the political commentary and the deep political commentary is going, we don't know what's going on, no one understands what the causation is. And then he reinstates the second in charge of the Knights of Malta. And that was from my books, The Hidden King of England, I'm a Christie, Unveiling the Rose, exposing Queen Victoria's firstborn and only legitimate child. So the Knights of Malta were released from the Vatican, which meant that the world's money was no longer under Vatican control.
Right, so the money was under Vatican control, but now it's under Rothschild control. So
it gets really complicated. The Rothschilds were the Vatican bankers from, I think it was actually 1839. The Rothschilds wanted to breed into the Sangreal lineage, which is the Jesus Mary lineage, the blood lineage of Jesus and Mary. It's called Sangreal. They wanted to breed into that, and they did do that. And they took license to breed with the British royal family for 200 years, which ended in May 2019, 200 years after the birth of Queen Victoria. But it really went from his death. So Mayer Amschel Rothschild was actually a psychic who also had financial knowledge, but he was a psychic, and he's known to be psychic. So in 1773, he had a lucid dream, and he recorded it in RAT, which is the Rothschild Archive Trust. And the dream was that the Rothschilds would breed into the Sangreal lineage and breed into the British royal family for 200 years from his death, and then the royal family would be returned. The people who are the royals of the United Kingdom would replace the flatline royals that we've got now. That was his dream. So that's supposed to happen between 2012 and 2019. Other things that happened in that time, we had the changeover into the New Age in 2014 and then a little bit more in 2017. 2014, we had the End Times New Age changeover. And that went on 777, which is 7 July 2014. Yeah?
Yeah.
2 + 1 + 4 is 7. And 777 makes up the number 21. And especially when 21 is made of 7 + 7 + 7, it's called the Shin or Forbidden Secret. And the person who was running the Forbidden Secret, the Shin, is me. Right? And
how do you know it's you?
Well, acknowledged. The Sangreal acknowledged it. And I told him stuff that I'd done, and he got a witness to listen to it. They'd go away and talk about it, and then a year later, he'd have another witness, and then ask me to tell him that story again. I'd tell him again. They'd go away and talk about it.
The Sangreal, what religion are they?
He's the blood royal of the Jesus Mary lineage.
So we're talking about the Israelites?
I wouldn't say he's Jewish.
The Israelites are not Jewish. There is an area of conflict here because, as I understand it, Jesus' people are the Israelites, and the Jews have hijacked the term Israelites and called, since 1948, their country next door to Palestine, Israel. But actually, that is plagiarism, I think it's called. The Israelites are the people the hierarchy planned to eradicate. So do you see how the stories are turned on their heads, because the Israelites are the people who lived in Northern Europe and they've gone to Australia and America and so forth. But Jesus actually lived here. England.
So you agree? I agree with that as well.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
But the Israelites are not Jews. And that is really, really important. Jews being Edomites. They're a different tribe, totally. It's a tribal thing. This goes back a long, long time.
It's quite clarifying, actually, because my great-great-grandfather was from Portugal, and he was this tall guy with huge Abrahamic features, big cheeks and a really strong chin and very strong and dignified and fantastic suit and chain, etc. I would call him an Israelite, but not a Jew, if you know what I mean.
Well, that's it. And the thing is, there's been an infiltration in all the churches. I mean, I've been to so many churches, and they've always said, oh, the Jews are the chosen people. And I'm thinking, why? Then I read into it, and it's not the Jews at all. It's the Israelites. And the Jews have called their country Israel. So that's why there is so much confusion. And that's why people do need to do their own research. But it's a little bit tricky because obviously the internet is run by the Edomites. So they're going to give a certain spin on it, because we've had spin doctors forever and a day.
Very interesting about the takeover of people's identities. In New Zealand, Maori means white native. And the white natives arrived in New Zealand in 232 BC, and they were from Egypt and Persia.
Right.
And they included the princely line from Persia because dark-skinned people from India came and attacked Persia in 232 BC. So a lot of the princes, etc., escaped from Persia to New Zealand and arrived in 232 BC. And when the Dutchman, Abel Tasman, came to New Zealand and kind of discovered it in 1642, there were white natives and they had green tattoos, like swirly tattoos, which were actually Egyptian. And then around Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, the Samoans saw the big, tall white ships coming in and going to their island and then to New Zealand. So they followed them. And then all these Samoans went to New Zealand in 1725 and killed and ate 99.984% of the population. So they left about 5 and 3,600 survive. I call them Pacific pikeys.
Why did they kill so many people? What was the purpose?
Well, they took over their identity. They got the white natives to sign the Treaty of Waitangi with Queen Victoria, which was very beneficial to the white natives called Maori. And then these Pacific pikeys came in, killed 1 million people that were there, ate a lot of them. The last big cannibal feast was in 1860, where they killed and ate 3,600 people in one day, and there were 5 who escaped and survived and became Patu Pairere, which is white people living in the bush. So these Pacific pikeys from Samoa took over the Maori identity and had a document saying that they owned the land, but they weren't the white natives. They were people from Samoa. I'm one of the original people from Egypt and Persia in New Zealand, and we should be given all the money and land being claimed by the Maori, but all these Pacific pikeys from Samoa are getting all the money and land, like, sort of $500 million a year. What's happening is that when land all of a sudden becomes depopulated, another group comes in, learns the history, and then steals their identity. And that is actually a really common theme. And what's happened in the United Kingdom is Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars has come in and stolen Elizabeth's identity as though she were dead because she's legitimate. So in legal terms, Elizabeth actually is dead. She's not the daughter of King George VI, and she's not the daughter of Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. The stolen identity thing, like the stolen identity of the Jews from Kazakhstan, who became Jews in about 800, 900 AD. They then went to Palestine in 1948 and took it over as their own, with Rothschild buying it. And they actually bought their own identity with Balfour Agreement by supplying Lord Balfour with children. He's got Stobo Castle, which is actually on the Balinas line, which is a king-making line running up the centre of England right through to Scotland. What the Jews did was capture photos of him having sex with children and then get him to sign the Balfour Agreement. And it wasn't actually an agreement. It was a 2-paragraph letter written by Balfour under pressure saying, we will do whatever we can to help the Jews get Israel back.
That's not surely a legitimate way of claiming land.
That is a way that major amounts of land are taken over by different people assuming another culture's identity. They go in, they learn the culture, then they kill everyone there and take on that identity. And that's what the Jews are doing. They're going to Palestine, killing all the Palestinians and taking on their identity as Jews on Palestinian land when they're also not the Jews.
We're talking about cultural Marxism here, aren't we?
That's interesting because Marxism and socialism were invented, created to stop the biblical prophecies from coming true, to stop the fulfillment of predictions, good predictions. That's what socialism's about. Socialism is the Antichrist. It wants to undo everything that has value. And socialism actually means no values. And socialism has no values at all. Whatever you say about Christianity, at least it had values. And it valued the family, and it valued parenting and passing down trades, father to son, etc. But socialism has no values, and socialism is dedicated to ensuring that none of the biblical prophecies come true. But the strange thing is that the more the socialists try to stop the biblical prophecies coming true, the more they confirm them and the more they do come true. It's very interesting to watch how that's coming about. I'm not a churchgoer or a Bible basher, I never have been, but I have studied the Bible last summer for definitions of words. And in doing that, I managed to pick up quite a bit of stuff about the predictions. And I've challenged all of the Christians around the world. I've got this open challenge to what are the signs of the second coming, Jesus' return or Christ's return, especially Christ's return, because Christ is actually a title. What are the signs that actually says in the Bible exactly what he looks like? And most Christians never know that. Like, look, you can absolutely see him straight away if it's him. You can eliminate 99.99999% of the population straight away by 4 things. All these Christians who go, oh, yeah, I'm a passionate Christian, I'm a dedicated Christian, and I talk to them, and they can't define anything definitively. It's too much faith-based stuff, it's waffle and hallelujah, and they don't seem to appreciate that there's 130 different words for Holy Spirit. Prana, Ismiasm, Bani, Ek, life force.
130 words for the Holy Spirit?
Yeah, there's 130 different words for it. Yeah.
Did you say Barney?
Barney's one, yeah. Barney, B-A-N-I is one, yeah. Ismiasm is another one. So I was quite disappointed with the Christians worldwide that they didn't know what the return of Christ actually looked like or what the signs are. And the signs are really definitive. Tell
me what the signs are then, because, we're all supposed to keep our lamps alight.
Do you know why that is? It's so you can't see out and they can see in.
Oh, right.
They actually used that when they were taking some really important religious remains down a street in Sewells in 1807-14. They were hiding some remains from an army. So they got everyone to put candles in their windows as a vigil, but it really meant that they could see in and no, they couldn't see out, People aside couldn't see out and they could see in.
Oh, right, okay.
And so they could walk down the street and no one could see them at night. And they're carrying this sacred body. One of the things I really like reading the Bible is get through all the double-speak esoteric and find out actually what they're saying. And they're often saying really practical things, and it's really little tricky things that give them an advantage, and they sort of hide it as a ritual. Some of the Old Testament rituals are just based on such absolute fallacies and stupidity. One of the tells of the return of Christ is that he absolutely criticizes the biblical fathers, which is contrary to what you think. So I'm talking about the Old Testament fathers. He absolutely rips them to shreds. The Bible actually gives the Messiah or Christ or Mashiach, he will absolutely criticize the Old Testament fathers and tear them apart, at least one of them.
But they reckon that 95% of churches today will not be able to walk into heaven based on the hierarchical beliefs.
A lot of them being taken over by intelligence agencies and they're just voting blocks. Okay, so here we've got some people who aren't really questioning anything. So how are we going to sway their vote? We'll get the priest to do it. We'll just sway him and then he'll tell his flock how to vote.
Absolutely. I was at a Methodist church 2 and a bit years ago now. This is after the referendum. I wanted to tell them about a National Prayer Day. The minister, in a very weak moment, and I say weak moment because it was rare for a minister to say to the whole congregation, have you got any notices, in front of everybody else? So I stood up and said, could I give a notice out? He said, okay. And you could see he looked very worried because obviously he knew I was very much into leaving the EU and that went against their church. So I went to the front, got hold of the microphone and explained there was this National Prayer Day in London and that God wanted us to leave the EU. Well, I mean, he could have been knocked down by a feather. There was like this deep intake of breath from the whole congregation. You could have heard a pin drop at that point. And then I just moseyed back to my little seat. And he just basically sort of excused me to the whole congregation and said, oh, don't mind about Caroline. It doesn't matter if you didn't vote to leave the EU. God is this, God is that, and the other. Then I wrote to him later and I talked to him about common law. That was actually God's law. And he said, no, we don't talk about politics in church. And I thought that was really funny. I said, but it's God's law, so why can't you talk about it in church? And of course, the church itself, the Church of England, is purely a political arrangement.
Yeah. And the Queen actually swears an oath to the bishops of the church, not to the people.
Well, that can't be right then, surely.
Elizabeth is the Queen.
No, but it can't be right, though. I mean, what I'm saying is that's not the way it should be, surely.
Yeah, absolutely, because she's a fake queen. And if she was a true monarch and true sovereign, she would have updated everything according to the times and according to the beliefs of people. And instead of protecting the Church of England, she's absolutely destroyed it. So the attendance is, there are more staff than attendees. It's zero. It's fat zero. As the churches have closed, they've been taken over by mosques and tattoo parlours. So churches close, tattoo parlours come up.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of churches that now meet in village halls, Rotary halls, etc. Although I still do have a question mark over churches meeting in halls based on Rotary symbolism and Freemasonry symbolism.
The Freemasons have this thing, the energy they leave behind in a meeting, and that's why they don't want other groups meeting in their temples. But it seems that it's okay for them to meet in others' churches, etc. Well, we got well off topic, which is kind of...
We have, actually.
I was a bit tired.
I've actually been able to speak tonight.
Yeah. The last 3 interviews, I've copied about 10 or maybe 15 pages and put it in a PDF form on the court notice, Queen Elizabeth II has no titles at best colour of law styles, public notice. Right, so I've put that on my website, www.kingof.uk. So you can go there and you should be able to read the text that I read off last night and the night before.
Can you just remind us, what's the website again called, Greg?
Kingof.uk.
Kingof.uk.
Yeah, dot is like a point, like King of UK, essentially. Yeah.
Well, in maths and in the finance world, I think they call it a spot.
A spot, okay. King of Spot UK. Right. When we do a focused interview, and I actually read and we stay on track, it takes a full hour to read 3 pages. How weird is that?
Yeah.
I said, really? Only 3 pages? Yeah. So either someone's interrupting or I'm a slow reader.
Are they level 2 readers, though, Greg?
We have been taken over by word, right? And it's quite interesting because I think the Bible says something like, in the beginning was the word, and the beginning of all contracts was the word. So we should really know what the words mean.
Yes.
Like the word annex is a weird word because to me, visually and phonetically, it means to cut something off and cast it aside. But apparently when you annex a country, you actually grab it and absorb it.
Yes.
Right?
That's
It's the opposite. It's just a weird word. And let with 2 T's means condemn. The Privy Counsellor oath states, quote, everything granted to Her Majesty is annexed to the Crown. And that means that everything granted to Elizabeth is given to the Crown. So everything granted to Elizabeth is given to Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars.
Do they pay tax?
The Royals.
Well, I think the Queen's only just recently started paying tax.
Yeah, we
went
up. I was staying at a friend's castle, right? It's quite a big area. It's a nice castle, nice grounds. Everywhere you see is his. And the tax person rings up while I'm there. I'm sitting quite close to the phone and I couldn't be asked moving. And that tax person goes, oh, your tax bill for this year will be, let's say, I'll give a different figure, but let's say £20,000. And he's got hundreds of houses on his land that he rents out, right? And it's a big area and it's incredibly complex. And the tax department just rings up all these large estate owners and tells them how much they'll pay this year. And it's just like a round figure, right? And it's less than the heating bill of the castle.
Really?
Yeah.
So how did they manage that then? Because a lot of rich people who've got castles have decrepit castles because they can't afford the maintenance.
Oh, this one's fine. All of this castle's open. They close off a few rooms in winter.
Oh, because it's opened up for the public, so they've done a deal with the tax people.
No, it's not that. No, they just close it off, a few rooms off in the winter, so they don't have to heat them. because the stone walls lose a lot of heat, etc. So they often close off one wing or one floor. So with the Queen in Windsor Castle, the tax department will ring up and say, "Oh, Elizabeth, you owe £50,000 in tax this year for all of your properties."
Right. Okay.
Right, and she's got, let's say 10% of England. But actually it's the Duchy of Lancaster that actually has all the property, but she is actually the Duke of Lancaster. The Duchy of Lancaster I think it's the biggest landowner in England. Massive. Like it's so big, it's embarrassing. The Duke of Norfolk is also massively wealthy. He's inherited a whole lot of other titles, so other lands as well. And he's also in charge of the Boy Scouts, and he's Catholic, and he's also part of deciding who the monarch is. So you've got Catholics in charge of the Boy Scouts deciding who the monarch of the United Kingdom is. And then you've got Elizabeth, who is an absolute Catholic, who's destroying the Church of England as fast and as much as she can, with absolutely total lack of interest. So much so that most of the churches have closed, and she's imported another religion and then opened up tattoo parlours everywhere.
Well, I think this has been done in conjunction with the Talmud. There's no difference really between the Talmud and the Quran. This is all connected with divide and rule. It's got to stop, because we have got a very limited window of opportunity now for us actually to take back control. Boris Johnson isn't going to get us out of the global corporations. He's not going to remove us from there at all. We've signed all the papers. We've signed all the stuff in Parliament with all these corporate trade deals, which basically allow the corporations to bankrupt the national government. And of course, it's us mugs, the taxpayers, that are actually going to bail this country out until we can't bail the country out anymore.
Yeah. If you had someone who had infiltrated a socialist and communist meeting in the 1950s, let's say 1951, that they had spoken on TV and said everything that communism and socialism had planned for the West and how they're going to destroy it. There'd be graffiti everywhere. There'd be total destruction of the family. Daughters would be in prostitution. Most of the people have tattoos. All the churches would close, be invaded by black people who were pretending to come from the Middle East.
They wouldn't have believed you.
The monarchs would be trafficking heroin, and all of the British royal family would be pedophiles and child murderers, and Prince Philip is just more or less announced as a cannibal as well as a pedophile. Then you just think the person's nuts. But that's exactly what's happened, because what happened in 1958, 57 to 59, is some of the objects were captured for predicting the future. So the future was all laid out in the 1st and 2nd century AD, basically between about 33 and 133 AD. All the future was laid out for the next 2,000 years, which is kind of de rigueur. And then in 1957 to 59, a lot of technology was captured whereby you could see the predicted future. So a lot of the people who were predicted to do big things in the future were then attacked by the socialists and communists and depowered, so they'd have no job, no money, no family, and would be caught up in the legal system and continually framed by these socialist, communist, pedophiles, etc., in order for the true and predicted future not to happen, or to happen more slowly. And I went and saw one of the military men, he's a real hard man, who had captured 2 of 6 of these pieces of technology in 1958. It was up in Newcastle, and he said to me, "We've been expecting you."
Right.
Which meant that I was one of the people predicted, right? And I was also one of the people who were severely attacked by the socialists and communists. Like, they'll stop at nothing to absolutely destroy the predictions. And the predictions are good things. And the predictions are for the Israelites. And the Israelites are the people who hold the values.
Yes.
Right? And
they are predominantly, from what I can see, they say there's a line of people from the northeast, and it's almost like a diagonal line to the southwest.
And that's the Israelites.
predominantly. And what's really interesting is that the northeast in particular was a huge Leave area. A lot of people have moved out of the city of London and moved across because they're better life. And that has obviously distorted the demographics. I mean, I was talking to somebody from the East Coast last night, and the RNLI are basically going out now to save the people in the boats coming in. So the demographics are certainly changing in this country, and there's no point in waiting till we're a minority and being less than the 50%. We've only got a short window
in which to breed.
Yeah, because if you want a family, you want to give them the best. So I guess for the indigenous population, the average rate is probably less than 2 now, 2 children per couple. People coming in from Eastern Europe, it's 3 per couple. And people coming from Muslim countries, perhaps it's 6 per couple. And it's not just that, it's the fact that they're breeding at an earlier age. So you're actually bumping up on the generations. So it's not just 8 per couple, but their children are already having children before.
They're breeding 3 generations throughout 2.
Absolutely, yeah. It's in the maths. It's just factual.
Well, this has all been planned. See, Queen Elizabeth realises that, for instance, I'm the true King of England, right? And I fulfilled all of the predictions, and she absolutely damn well knows what those predictions are. So she's trying to destroy the United Kingdom before she hands it over to me. I am also holding the values during the tribulations, and the tribulations are almost over. Now, I also ran and I'm running the Shin, and I'm also Arch Treasurer of the Royal Secret. So I have all the royal secrets and I'm allowed to tell them. And I'm also registered in the Holy See as a member of the Jesus Mary lineage, which places me above Elizabeth and above all of the royals of the United Kingdom and Europe. And that means that none of them are allowed to say anything against me.
Really?
Yeah.
How wonderful is that?
So there's rules to the game.
We're in a satanic realm, aren't we, at the moment? We're in the Vatican realm. So, as you say, we have to play the rules by their game.
No, because I got the Knights of Malta out of the Vatican. So I released the world's money supply without Vatican control.
As I see it, there's covert messaging at the moment in the newspapers, which is implying that the banks could crash. The money supply will not be as we've had it in the past. It will all change.
What they're actually saying subconsciously is the face on the notes and the coins may change. Not that we're going to be in a cashless society.
You don't think so?
The British people, let's say the Israelites in Britain, right, the white people, we love to trade a little bit of coin, have a laugh and a bit of banter. Like, you can't do that with a credit card. You can't swipe a credit card or put it in and you can't have a banter and say 9.5 for a laugh. You just can't do that with a card. And the British people are traders. They love to trade. They love to throw a bit of coin at each other.
Well, you see, going back to up north east, I mean, we like a bargain, don't we? Cash is king. They always used to say cash is king. People in Parliament who say they want to dump the EU are actually lying, treacherous people. They are not telling the truth. And those people are often in the Privy Council. So they speak with forked tongue. They do, don't they? Got a think tank called Bright Blue Scotland, an Agenda 21 think tank. We've got 184 parliamentarians on there who are supporters. They range from people like Anna Soubry to Jacob Rees-Mogg to the 2 MPs who are in charge of Swindon, one who's Remain and one who wanted to leave. So it blurs. What I'm trying to get people to thinking outside the box, and for them to realise and wake up the fact that people in Parliament who say they want to leave the EU are actually supporters of the New World Order agenda.
Absolutely, and a lot of the Remainers are also compromised through the pedophilia. The world is run on shame, and most of the politicians are compromised through pedophilia or drug dealing or prostitution. And if you take Tony Blair, he was a homosexual who was caught in an act of sex with an underage male who was also a homosexual prostitute and a heterosexual prostitute, when Rupert Murdoch paid Tony Blair to have sex with Rupert Murdoch's wife so that Rupert Murdoch could have a cheaper divorce and marry Jerry Hall. Mick Jagger's ex. I mean,
yes. I've seen her at the bedroom window. I used to stay in a hotel next door to their house. I've seen her actually in real life. I didn't realise that Murdoch actually paid Tony Blair to do that.
Rupert Murdoch paid Tony Blair to have sex with Rupert Murdoch's wife just before their divorce. He was one of the ones that got us into this mess. And also John Major is a grey man. He's an absolute out-and-out liar. And the reason Margaret Thatcher got kicked out of Parliament so quickly and with no thanks whatsoever is that at the end, right at the end of doing a whole lot of really bad things, that she grew a conscience and they kicked her out and replaced with John Major, who then prorogued Parliament. So he shut down Parliament so that the Maastricht Treaty would go through, which the Queen loved because it was everything that she was taught in her school, in her 10.5 hours education a week. So she signed the Maastricht Treaty and committed treason. She's never been the Queen. There's only 2 real kings in the United Kingdom every 2,000 years. And every other monarch in between is going, how shall I define my kingship?
So who are the real kings?
You said that you believe that Jesus went to England, right?
Yeah.
And would that be before crucifixion year? Let's call it AD 33. Would that be before crucifixion year or after crucifixion year?
I guess it was before.
Well, so you're saying he died on the cross?
Well, they reckon he was married with children, don't they?
Yeah. Well, see, the way I've got it is the lineage, and he didn't actually carry the cross. Simon of Cyrene actually carried the cross, and the word cross wasn't used. It was gibbet, which means scaffold, right? And if you really read the Bible, there are actually no witnesses to the crucifixion, none of the apostles, and there's a couple of people about 100 metres away. So
that's it.
Could they really see him? There's documentary evidence of about 6 Jesuses post-crucifixion. And
yes, I've heard that as well.
The ones that I've written up, 2 volumes on it. One was that Jesus went to Regni, which was Kent. It used to be called Regni, Regni, and he was king of Regni. And then he walked 44 miles along Pilgrim's Way to Suffolk Cathedral, which is in London, and he took the ferry across to Temple Bar. And he became the mayor of London. And from the mayor of London, he was an assize judge. And then he became the king of England, effectively, from being the mayor of London. And the mayor of London is still actually does all the job of the king of England.
Well, it was interesting that a certain event had happened at St. Michael's Mount. So they felt that Jesus had been quite affiliated with that particular area. Cornwall?
I know quite well.
It's really nice around there. And also, I was watching a video yesterday, an analysis of the Turin Shroud.
Yeah.
And they had checked the blood of Jesus, and they found the X chromosome from Mary, but there was no Y chromosome. A virgin birth.
There's too many. Yeah, I just don't believe the sourcing on it. I'm in 2 minds about the shroud. But other people have actually died and had a sheet over them and had their own images imprinted onto the cloth. He looks like an absolute Templar dude. There is a real loop in it, looping one thing to the other. So he's their so-called Shroud of Turin. And then there's the Turin lions in the Turin Zoo, and they are used as the models for the statues of the lions in Trafalgar Square, right, the 4 lions in Trafalgar Square. And those 4 lines are actually a model of the ancient map of London in 1560. I think it was the first map of London was drawn, which is in the shape of a lion without the head, suggesting that Jesus was Lord Mayor of London and he was the head of the lion. So if you look at the old city of London, it's in the shape of a lion. And the paw of the lion, like if a dog likes you, it'll put its paw over your foot. Yeah. So if a lion likes you, it'll put your paw over. So the paw of the lion on the map actually marks Jesus' grave. And then if you get all these old maps often had flag and ribbon up the top in an oval shape with a couple of flags on it, like blowing in the wind. So I got that image up top and I reversed it and then made it like 50% transparent and put it over the rooftops in the map. And where the ribbons matched with the rooftops actually marked Jesus' grave. So I marked Jesus' grave, and then I found that it was actually marked by a griffin. And the griffin dragon, with the wings out like that, is the mark of a silent emperor, a very esteemed king. And that mark is the griffin dragon between Temple Bar and the Royal Courts of Justice, which is right outside the Templar Temple, the round temple. And that's where Jesus was buried, there, under that dragon. And they always put the most important graves in the maximum amount of traffic. And that's where Temple Bar Gate was. Right? So he used to have a toll gate there. And then it used to be an archway. And then it got marked by the dragon. The letters under the dragon here, CG, which means Cumberland George or George Cumberland, and that was showing the lineage, and that was Prince Marcos Manuel's father, was Blind Prince George of Cumberland, and Prince Marcos Manuel held the title Christ. It's actually a title, right? And he held the title Christ above all Templar Grand Masters who had achieved Gnosis, and above all those in the Johannite tradition, which also used the title Christ. So I'm one of the people with the title Christ, but I'm not in the Johannite tradition or the Templars. So that's kind of interesting. And the person who holds the title Christ, the highest level of the title Christ, is automatically the King of England, which is why my name is on British coins and on royal style and titles.
As I see it, the New World Order and the royal family, they don't fit well. I see that they want to collapse the royal family because you've got a lot of communism, Marxism spreading now. Those people don't want a royal family, and that suits because the royal family don't want to be there anymore. They've taken their booty, and they've also got their own problems like Prince Andrew with Epstein, etc., etc. And
Prince Charles with Jimmy Savile.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just disgusting.
Queen Elizabeth murdering her lesbian lover, Grace Kelly.
Sorry, what was that bit?
Queen Elizabeth murdering her lesbian lover, Grace Kelly.
Oh, so she swung by both sides then?
Yeah, she's bisexual. Yeah.
The writing is on the wall, and that's biblical, the Bible. Quite a good sat-nav. Cracking quotations, politics now. If the blind lead the blind, they all end up in a ditch. Anybody who's now going into a political party, the blind are leading the blind, and you will all fall in a ditch. It's so plain. It's all about divide and conquer. It may or may not be Article 61. The jury's out on so many different groups. Greg, you're a star. Thank you so much.